Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of PWI Presents Face Turn with Candace Cordelia, where we give you exclusive interviews with some of your favorite wrestlers, backstage personalities, and more in the professional wrestling industry. Today, I am super excited to kick down this second or third episode we have going for our second season of the show. You know, we like to bring a array of different personalities here, and today there's no exception. You might have seen this beautiful woman who is on the left of my screen for NWA interviewing the stars of National Wrestling Alliance, and she is here to talk about her experiences, her journey, and so much more. I am proud to present to you Ms. May Valentine. How are you, May?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure.
Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to meet you finally. I know we've talked a bit before this informal interview. We're going to have fun today, but it's really nice to see you and to meet you. And I'm really excited for our fans.
Likewise.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
So, definitely. So let's just kick things off. You know, I was doing my research and your background is so fascinating, May. You have done so much prior to getting to NWA. And my first question for you, because I understand you have a artistic background, you've grown up in a very artistic family, and you are, or you were born in Rio de Janeiro. So I definitely would love our viewers, first and foremost, to know exactly what it was like for you growing up in Rio, and really growing up in this fantastic artistic family, both from your mother and your father.
Sure. As you're saying that, I'm actually looking at the poster behind you, and the same way that Paige was fighting with her family, my family was like writing and acting with my family. So pretty much, my dad was a writer. He was a playwright, and he wrote novellas for television, which are like the most famous type of TV programming in Brazil. Everybody watches novellas. So my father was a very well-known writer, and my mom was an actress as well. So my childhood was 100% artistic. I was surrounded by acting and rehearsals and going to plays and always being sort of a part of this like television and theater world. And that's pretty much what I loved doing when I was a child. I loved writing. I loved acting. I loved music. I would write my own songs. I would do my own music videos. I would write plays and have my friends from school come over and film them. I would edit it. I would think that I could do everything. So that was like my idea of fun when I was a kid. And it was very supported by my parents. It was always me and my younger sister. So that's how we grew up. And as a child, you don't even realize that other families aren't like that, or that life isn't necessarily like that for everybody. So we just thought, you know, this is what you do. You act and you dance and you sing, and this is life. So it was a very happy childhood
in that sense. Very beautiful. Where does wrestling fit into your childhood? I mean, did you grow up watching wrestling at all?
Not at all. Wrestling is not very mainstream in Brazil, actually. So I didn't grow up wrestling, and the majority of people that I know in Brazil don't even understand wrestling or know much about wrestling. So soccer is huge in Brazil. And as of lately, mixed martial arts are huge in Brazil. But up to now, like, wrestling is a foreign world to Brazilians. So growing up, I basically knew about the figures that everybody knows about, like Hulk Hogan and China. So that was my only concept of wrestling, really, growing up.
Oh, wow. And, you know, you talked about growing up acting and performing and directing, and this has led to you writing your first novel as a teenager.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was blown away by the fact that it caught on like quick fire in Brazil. It became really popular. So please tell us about your first novel. You wrote it at 17, which is amazing.
Yeah. So I grew up writing, and I used to write in diaries my whole life, and I still have all those diaries. So I pretty much wrote every day of my life since I was like a child. I would say maybe 7 or 8 years old, up until I was 15. I wrote in diaries. So that's always something that I enjoyed doing and that I felt comfortable and confident in. I didn't feel confident with a lot of things growing up. I was very insecure, but with writing, I knew that I was a good writer. And so I liked writing. And I've told this story many times, so I'll be a little bit short about it. But I lost my father when I was 11 years old. My father died in a car accident in Brazil. And stemming from that event, a lot of things changed in my life. I became a very rebellious teenager. Nobody could tell me what to do. I was your drug, sex, rock and roll, typical rebellious teenager. And but I was really actually very depressed, and I was going through a depression and the loss of my father and all the changes in my life. And I was sort of acting out in these rebellious ways as a teenager. And so when I was 16, I was very unhappy in the school that I went to. I always felt very different from everybody. It was a very conservative type of upscale school, and you would be sort of judged for being different. And I loved being different, and I always been different. And I just didn't feel comfortable there. And pretty much I didn't want to be in school anymore. So when I was 15, I sort of put it in my head that I didn't want to go to school anymore. And I was going to be homeschooled, and I was going to become a writer, which is a really crazy idea. And I'm not recommending it to anybody because I was in a privileged situation where I already had my father who was a writer and my mom who was an actress. I had a structure. So obviously I wouldn't recommend, hey, drop out of school and, follow your dreams at 15. But luckily for me, it worked out. And I started writing my first book when I was 16 years old, after I left school. And my mom was very angry at me, actually. What are you going to do with your life? And I had a conviction that I was going to be a writer. And so I started writing a book when I was 16. And I was very honest, very raw. That's I think the biggest quality in my writing is that I'm very honest and very raw. And I really don't care about, you can ask me anything and I don't care about talking about it. So my book was kind of like that. And it talks about the problems that I was going through as a teenager with depression and my father's death and relationships that were sort of not good for you. I was always looking for the approval of a guy or for my self-worth in a guy because I didn't grow up with that male figure in my life. So I talked about all of this in my book. And luckily for me, I got a publishing deal by the time I was 19. And it was with the largest publishing company in South America. And it actually became a bestseller. So from that point on, I was able to start a writing career, but I was very lucky that it worked out.
Yes, because writing, you're speaking to another writer as well, a journalist, and it's not easy. And the fact that you were able to get a publishing deal at such a young age is, quite honestly, it's fantastic and miraculous as well. And it sounds like this led to a really in-depth journalism career for you. I mean, I understand you've written for so many high-profile magazines. You were involved in interviewing so many high-profile celebrities. So talk to us about the transition to being a novelist to being an actual journalist.
Right. So when my book came out, it was insane. It was like an instant success. It's hard to describe here because this all went on 15 years ago in a different country, but it was like waking up in the morning and suddenly you're on the cover of the biggest newspaper and everybody's talking about your problems, your drug problems and your depression and your this and your that. So it wasn't easy, but immediately I became like a sort of a known figure in the press. And that led to a lot of people being interested in me. And so when I was 19, I was invited to write as a columnist for the largest newspaper in Brazil. So that's how it all started. It started with this column and I had a biweekly column. And eventually they asked me to start doing interviews. So I started doing music interviews and movie interviews. And just one thing would lead to the other. Like the next week, a different magazine would be asking me to work for them. And I worked for so many people, like you said. I had a literature show on MTV Brazil by the time I was like 20, I think. And then I did VH1, I did Rolling Stone, I did Glamour magazine, I did a bunch of sort of like gossip magazines there, travel magazines, erotic magazines. Like I wrote for everybody that would give me a chance to write for, pretty much at that time.
That's amazing. So how do you go from being a journalist to being one on television for NWA? How did that journey actually start? Because I do recall you met Billy Corgan. That's how this whole thing kicked off. So tell us, how did that start?
Well, I did know Billy prior, but so I'll just back off a little bit. So I worked for many years as a journalist. And when I was 21, I moved to the United States. I moved straight to Hollywood. And I started working as a red carpet reporter here. I worked for several different magazines. And I did that for many years. Like I've been here since I was 21. So a few years ago, I was sort of going through another one of those moments where I felt kind of depressed and I wanted to change my life somehow. I have these moments throughout my life where I'm sad and then something great comes out of it. And that was one of those moments where I was watching wrestling on television. I was watching WWE like randomly because I did start watching after living here. So I started watching wrestling in my 20s. So I was watching because Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch. I always say that I think that's what it was because I'm still not sure, but I think that's what it was. And I just felt like very, very inspired in a way that I hadn't felt in many years. And at that moment, I really wanted to find a way to empower myself and to do something challenging and different from anything that I had ever done before. And I had this crazy idea. I want to become a wrestler. And it was really out of the blue like that. I didn't know much about wrestling at all. And I literally Googled, how do you become a wrestler? And I saw you have to go to wrestling school. So that was my first step. I found a wrestling school in Las Vegas and I moved to Las Vegas 2 days after. So it was like an impulsive decision that I just said, this is what I'm going to do now, period. And people in my life were very confused. They were like, what are you doing? Yeah, sure. You're going to be a wrestler now. Okay. And so I went to Vegas and I lived in like the hotels and the casinos for like 6 months. I would move from hotel to hotel every week according to the prices. So I would say I lived in like 20 different Vegas hotels during that time and started going to wrestling school. And that's kind of how it all began. And I already knew Billy. I've been a fan of Smashing Pumpkins my whole life. So I've loved Billy as an artist my whole life. But then a few years ago, I was cast in a Smashing Pumpkins music video. And that's kind of how like I connected with him. A while after that was when I was in wrestling school and Billy saw on my page that I was in wrestling school and all of a sudden contacted me and said, hey, how would you like to work with the NWA? And that's how the conversation started. It was very early on into having made that decision, that crazy decision. And like, it was as if it was meant to be, because I'm doing this crazy thing that nobody believes in. Basically, I'm the only one who can believe in myself living out here and, taking bumps and, what am I even doing? I'm a writer. But then, something said to me, hey, this might work out when Billy Corgan reached out. And so that's how it happened. And I came into the NWA.
Wow, that is such a story. And I mean,
I know.
You training, I want to rewind just a tad because as someone who spent a majority of your life writing and being around other artists, and all of a sudden you are taking this chance to be a wrestler in a sport that's extremely physical. I mean, what was that like for you getting into a ring and the first bump that you took?
The scariest thing I've ever done in my life, for real. Like I love mixed martial arts. So I always watch MMA and boxing and stuff. And I did do boxing and MMA trainings for a few years. So I had interest in that. I was never super athletic. I don't have any athletic professional background at all, but I enjoyed very hard workouts. Like that's one thing that I knew about myself is that like pushing myself as something that I enjoy, like when it hurts, when it's painful, and when I have to like really, stick to it and get through it. And so, but when I went to the school, I had no idea what was ahead of me. And at that point, I also felt like I had to prove myself to all the people that were doubting me. And my first day in school was terrifying. I remember the trainer, Sin Bodhi, he had his run, I think it was 20 laps around the block or something. And I was running there, and in my head, I was like, what the hell am I doing? What the hell am I doing? And I remember one of the students, he screamed at me and he said, hey, new girl, how crazy are you? And I was like, obviously very crazy. I had no idea how hard it was going to be, but I fell in love with it like right away. Like it was the hardest thing I had to do. And I think on your first day at a wrestling school, they really push you to see how far you can go and if you're able to handle it. So that first day is especially hard for anybody initiating in wrestling. And it was extremely scary, but my thought at the end of the day was I want to come back. So I kept coming back, And I had so much to overcome physically, and I still have a lot to overcome physically because I don't have this athletic background. But I do feel like I have come a long way since I went into the ring for the first time, which looked very awkward.
Oh, sure. I mean, so you were still in training when you were asked to be a part of the NWA, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. So then you go to the NWA and you're not a wrestler in the NWA at first. I understand that you came aboard as the girlfriend of Royce Isaacs, and then all of a sudden, you're in these storylines and things are percolating. How did the transition go for you from being that character to actually getting backstage and doing the broadcasting work?
Right. So initially, I mean, I was so green, like it wasn't possible to just have me debut in a ring 6 months into training. I was not ready by any means, but I still wanted to be a part of it. And Billy wanted me to be a part of it too. And so that the idea was for me to debut as Royce's girlfriend. But so after I was in Vegas, eventually I left Vegas because it was just not sustainable to keep moving from hotel to hotel. Like I got over it at some point, and I was like, I need to go back to LA and like have a more peaceful life again. I can't handle Vegas anymore. So I came back, and I came in contact with Royce through a match of his that I had watched at the school. And I initially asked him to help me train because I said, I need to find a setup in Los Angeles, and I don't know like how to keep training in LA. So before I even knew I was going to be his girlfriend in the NWA, all of this was a huge coincidence. I was already training with Royce. And Royce was already in the NWA. So separately from Royce being in the NWA, I was contacted by Billy Corgan, which is like a weird, crazy coincidence. And then he was like, oh, it makes sense for you guys to work together since you're already working together. So he trained me for a bit too. And the whole pandemic happened, as you know, so many things changed. And so they didn't know what I could do because I wasn't in the storyline with Royce anymore. And that's, when the idea came about that I could be a backstage reporter. And I guess they're happy because I'm still there.
100%. And it just seems like with every chapter of your story, there's all of these destined moments, coincidences. And now, obviously, they love you. Your fans love you because you are such a presence with the work that you're doing with NWA. And you certainly stand out in a fantastic manner. What has it been like for you solidifying your role as a backstage personality, interviewing these stars, and doing so in a company that really has seen a lot of changes in a positive way over the past several years?
I mean, first of all, it's such an honor to have that position. I really love it. And it's actually very challenging. It's more challenging than most people could even understand, but I'm sure that you understand. So much of the work that we do is improv and it's on the fly. And when you're working as a backstage reporter, you're sometimes doing like 30 interviews in 2 hours and you have no idea who's coming in your room next. And you have to think very quickly and you have to be on your feet. And it's not always easy. It's sometimes very challenging and very difficult. So it has been a transition to me, for me, especially because before I was mostly a writer. Like I did do on-screen stuff. I did TV junkets. I did MTV, but mostly I did writing. So I think as a writer, when I'm standing there, I am writing in my head. And sometimes I think that it comes off as if I'm reading. And that's because I write on the spot. So I'm standing there with somebody and I go in my head. And then I read it off of my head. But really, there are no lines. There is no script. So it's definitely challenging. But the more you do it, the more you learn. So I guess there is no other way.
I love that you bring up the fact that it's much more difficult than people realize, because seeing it from the outside, you're looking at someone who's interviewing and you're standing there, and it's sometimes, I would assume, people think there's a teleprompter, but
there is no teleprompter.
Exactly. There's no teleprompter. So it's really fascinating that you stated you're writing the lines in your head that you're going to say, and then saying them verbatim or kind of on the mark.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I was having a conversation about that with Joe Galley, who is also an important voice in the NWA. And I was telling him this, that I write as I'm talking. And sometimes I feel like it comes off as if I'm reading, but it's because I'm reading it off of my head. And he said, that's very interesting because that is my background as a writer showing up, the same way that he has a background as an improv actor. And I was like, I never realized it, but it's very, very true. It's like our backgrounds coming through in our personality.
Do you feel as though if there were a teleprompter that would actually hinder you a bit, or?
Oh, that would not be good. I do not need a teleprompter. No, it's all good.
Noted. You're like, Billy.
I would have to wear glasses, first of all. I have horrible vision.
So you don't wear any contact lenses at all?
No, I do. I do wear contact lenses. I'm making a joke. Yeah. But I rather not have a teleprompter.
Understandable. Yeah. Everyone has their certain preparation. I mean, is there anything else that you do before a show? Anything special, like any rituals or things that you talk about with anyone else backstage?
Well, most of the time, I only know what I'm going to work with when I get to set. So rarely do I ever know the night before what is going to happen. I could walk in there and have 20 interviews. I could walk in there and be hosting on stage or be doing commentary. You really don't know until you get to set that day. So I feel like the preparation is mostly mental, staying grounded and not letting like your fear of not knowing what you're doing get to you, because I do struggle with that. I have anxiety when I don't know exactly what I'm going to do. And so for me, the work is very much in like staying grounded and just believing that everything's going to work out and that you're going to be able to handle 30 improv interviews on the spot.
Absolutely. Did you find yourself looking at any other broadcasters within any other promotions just for inspiration or to kind of get a feel for the job as you went along?
I try not to, honestly, because I don't want to take from anyone else's style. I want it to come naturally from me. Like when I'm writing a book, I'm the same way. I don't read any books simultaneously. I try to take it all from within myself. Not that I don't want to be watching other broadcasters. I'm very interested in watching other broadcasters. I just don't want to take from anybody, if that makes sense.
It sure does. Is there anything about the NWA that when you first got there and you started to really find your footing as a backstage interviewer and as a host and announcer, that you were like, this is the place for me. There's a reason why I'm here. And this is a special opportunity that I have in front of me and I need to just grab that. I mean, is there anything about NWA that stands out?
It feels like a very special opportunity. I love the workplace in the NWA. And I think that what I like the most is the different personalities and how much you learn from everybody. You know, you get so much different knowledge from all of the amazing people that come through in the NWA. And, you know, it's a legendary company. It's an honor to be representing the logo, to be representing the company. I mean, I come from Brazil, you know, and I'm hosting for the oldest wrestling company in the United States. So I realize it's a really big deal. And I just have to be so grateful to Billy, you know, for seeing that in me and believing that I have this capacity, because sometimes I do need someone else to bring that out in me because I can be insecure about myself. But the more he pushes me, I feel like the better I do. So yeah.
That's really lovely. I mean, is there anything that Billy has said, any advice that you've really taken to heart and something that you think about whenever you get in those moments of doubt, potentially?
Yeah, there are so many times like that. Like, we just recently had a show in St. Louis. We had Empower, and then we also shot NWA Power. And it was a much bigger audience than what we were used to at the Chase. And I learned the day of that I was going to be hosting live on the podium, which is something that I hadn't done before. I had been backstage the whole time. And I looked at the script and I couldn't believe that was happening. And I went up to Billy to like ask him for advice or just tell him that I was terrified. I went up to him and I said, "Hey, by the way, just so you know, I'm terrified." And he said to me, "I know, but you're going to do it. So just do it." And I was like, okay, it's that simple. You're going to do it. So just do it, you know, and that sometimes you just have to think like that. You're going to have to get through it. So get through it, you know, and then when you're done with it, you will know that you have the ability to maybe host a show in front of an audience. And you wouldn't know that otherwise if you weren't thrown out there somehow.
Mm-hmm. And you spoke of your family earlier in terms of a lot of different individuals in your life not really understanding, you know, why you were getting into wrestling. With this role in place, being a backstage personality, what did your loved ones think about? Were they really just more like, well, what's happening now? You're going from wrestling to being an interviewer, and they, I mean, up till now, do they still kind of not understand it, or are they more open-minded about the role that you've taken on?
Well, my mom now understands it. My mom now watches Wrestling Weekly, which is really funny. Like, sometimes I won't even be watching live and my mom will be watching live and she'll be messaging me what's going on. And she'll have things to say about the matches. And she'll say, "Oh, I love this one because one person was huge and the other one was small." I was like, "Great comments, Mom." But, you know, she's getting into it. So she understands it now. But I think the biggest struggle for me is getting the people in my life interested in wanting to understand it. Because, yeah, they think kind of like, "Oh, I thought you were going to fight." They don't even understand fight, wrestle, what it means. But they're like, "I thought you were going to fight." And I'm like, "Yes, that could be the case. But right now I'm in this other position and I have to explain that wrestling has so many different positions and I could be doing different things at different times." And yeah, it's confusing for people. But then I also have a lot of people that support me and that think it's really, really awesome. Like, who the hell wakes up and says, "I'm going to be a wrestler," and then ends up working for the NWA? So I do feel a lot of those reactions, especially here in Hollywood, where people have known me just as a writer. And all of a sudden they're like, "What? You're in wrestling?" And there are both people that like go like, "Why?" And people that go like, "Oh my God, you're the coolest person in the world." So there's like both reactions.
I mean, you are a very cool person, May. Absolutely. You've done so much in your life thus far, and you're in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have this preconceived notion of what Hollywood is. For you, being in Hollywood, do you find yourself wanting to venture out in other outlets of entertainment, say doing more acting or back to writing?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like if you live in Los Angeles and you're working in the entertainment industry, you're going to end up doing different things. So I've done acting, I've done modeling, I do interviewing. You know, I've had times in my life where I've done background. Like, there is a little bit of everything to do around here. And yeah, absolutely. And I'm very open to everything. I love being creative and being artistic and just overall like taking risks. And who knows what might come out of something. Sometimes you take a risk and then something really huge happens in your life, like this, for example.
Exactly. And wrestling is all about risks, right? And one risk, which turned out to be a huge success, was NWA Empower, the pay-per-view. And we saw a lot of you at the event. It was phenomenal from top to bottom, a lot of surprises and a lot of really special moments. What was it like for you being a part of that and really seeing that come into fruition?
That was one of my happiest days in wrestling. It felt so amazing to see so many like powerful, beautiful, talented women coming together, and there not being any drama, not being any cattiness, and everybody just really being there to support each other. It's such a wonderful energy when you can get women to truly support each other and bring each other up. And I feel like Empower did do that. And there was a great vibe backstage. I was so honored to be a part of it. I'm very thankful to Mickie James for giving me that opportunity. And I remember the first night that we were there, the day prior to the show, we had a production meeting. And so the production meeting was with Medusa, Jazz, Gail Kim, and Mickie James. A couple of the refs were there too, and me. And I was like looking around and going like, how did I get to this room? And it was so confusing to me. And I just had to keep telling myself, like, keep having confidence in yourself. You belong in this room. Because there was a part of me that was like, should I be here? With all of these legends, and they are just so wonderful. All of them are so wonderful. And the younger girls are just so lucky that they're there, and they do want to empower them. And that's not just a slogan or something. They're there helping, like Jazz and Medusa. They're working in the NWA, Mickie obviously also, but Jazz and Medusa are agents backstage now. So, they get to be there and pass on all of their knowledge. And it's just like super, super special.
And everyone that you named, I mean, so iconic, so legendary. And I can only imagine what it's like being in that room with all of those women. It had to be a heady experience, but I'm sure you've come out of this even more knowledgeable about wrestling. Is there any are there any other roles?
I've had to.
Exactly, right? Are there any other roles that you can see yourself pivoting to, such as maybe booking or production or being an agent? I mean, do you think about those things?
Yeah, absolutely. I watch what everybody's doing, and I try to learn from everybody. Every single person who's working backstage, I'm sort of watching and trying to understand how everything happens. Like, that's the way I am. I observe everything, and that's how I learn. And yeah, I've thought about it. Obviously, there are other positions in wrestling that I could work. And if I didn't want to, or didn't have the opportunity to be doing backstage reporting anymore, I feel like there's production, there's writing, there's so much. And yeah, I would love to be a part of that eventually, but hopefully that comes more in the future.
Yes, that would be fantastic. And we need to see more women backstage too. And we are seeing that. We're seeing this revolution of those roles really being filled by a lot of women. And I think that's definitely going to be something we're going to see more of in the future. So you're definitely at an advantage. Is there anything about being a backstage interviewer that you feel is overlooked, or is something that may be mysterious to people watching from the outside?
Well, it's basically what we were talking about, like how many different skills it takes to do something like that. And it isn't as easy as just standing there and reading something out of a monitor. You have to be aware of maybe 30, 40 different storylines that are going on at the same time. And you have to understand all the characters and the different storylines. And you have to be able to figure out what is the question that the audience wants to hear in that little 2-minute segment, So yeah, there is a lot, I think.
And is there anyone in the NWA? I mean, we're seeing you really interview a lot of amazing talent within the promotion and really seeing the little nuances within your interviews, which is really fascinating and cool to witness. Is there anyone in the NWA that you really want to do more with in terms of the interviews and storylines and all of that good stuff?
I mean, everybody. I like working with everybody. When somebody different comes into my interview room, I'm like, great. When it's the same people that I've done tons with, I'm like, great. I enjoy doing it with everybody. I think it's such a pleasure that I get to work with almost everybody in the show. Like, that's a privilege that I have that other people don't. I get to have scenes with almost all the characters.
Exactly. And it's really been amazing witnessing this both on television and YouTube and seeing
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were saying, oh, I can't hear you. It's okay. This is the life of virtual. We have to always pivot and make sure that we can hear each other and see each other. But you're very welcome. It's really, really nice seeing the work that you're doing with NWA and seeing you coming into your own and really staking your claim within the promotion. But I do want to pivot because, I'm watching your social media, loving the pictures that you have. They're always so gorgeous. And I mean, it's easy to see that you're a huge music person, as am I. You love your rock and roll. I really need to know. Yes, you got to, right? I really need to know, and for our audience as well, who your favorite bands are, the latest concerts that you've been going to as we're getting out of this this pandemic.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
I've been going to concerts since I was 10 years old. So I've gone to every concert that you can possibly imagine. Like, music and rock and roll has always been like my number one love and my number one passion. And why I became a journalist, why I became a reporter. I wanted to talk to my favorite bands. I wanted to meet my favorite bands. And I wanted to have like meaningful conversations with the artists that I love. So that's always been my thing. I love rock and roll. I'm a rock chick, and I don't think it's just music. It's attitude and it's lifestyle, and it's just who I am, and it's a part of me. I love all kinds of music, really, but rock and roll would be my genre. Growing up, my favorite artist was Marilyn Manson, to the horror of my mom. Even more now when she gets to say I was right, and it's a terrible thing. But yeah, I was a huge Marilyn Manson fan growing up. And I loved Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue. I had my super punk phase. I loved the Sex Pistols, the Ramones. I had my glam phase, where I loved the New York Dolls. And it was just like a little bit of everything, but everything very rock and roll, always with attitude and, just like people kind of attitude. That's what I liked. That's what I liked in my music.
and once again, you're talking about an industry that mirrors wrestling quite a bit. There's a lot of similarities between the two. And we're seeing the fact that everything in your life has really led you to this destined moment. I mean, it's just amazing, because whether it's with your writing, your love of rock and roll, just watching wrestling on one fateful day, it's all led up to this moment for you.
Yeah. And one of my favorite rock stars in the world is who gave me that opportunity, which is even crazier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's really just amazing and awesome, May, to talk with you and be a part of this journey with you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And what's next? What is next for May Valentine? Where do you see yourself, going into the...
You might see May Valentine doing a little bit more action, but just keep watching and you'll see what's going to happen.
Okay. And we have the Crockett Cup coming up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyone who's interested in coming, tickets are for sale. nwatix.com, March 19 and 20 in Nashville. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
And we cannot wait to see what comes next. For your parting words, I'm sure there's going to be some people watching this thinking, how could I do what May Valentine does? How can I potentially be a broadcaster, whether it's interviewing, commentating, ring announcing? What would be your advice to that person?
Build a social media presence is number one. Work on your brand. Turn yourself into a brand. Go online. Have videos up. Try to get interviews, create your own YouTube channel, make yourself known. There is space in wrestling for people coming up as journalists. There are a few young girls that have had the pleasure to be interviewed by recently. That's how they're coming up. Be on Twitter, be engaging, get yourself in there, and eventually you will get those opportunities, have your own blog, have your own channel, have your own podcast, but really work at it and take it seriously. But more than that, remember to brand yourself and make sure you are a product also. You're something that people want to see and that people want to hire. You're a full package, not just for your opinions, but for everything else too.
Very wise and very important. Thank you so much, May Valentine.
Thank you.
An honor to finally meet you, to talk with you and really get an inside scoop about your story, which is just fascinating from the top to, I don't want to say the bottom because we're just getting started. It seems like you're just getting started. The next chapter is unwritten.
Hopefully.
Yes, and we can't wait.
The rest is still unwritten.
Famous last words for this
corny song quotation.
But we love it. We love it here.
I love it. I love corny songs. They're my favorite.
Me too. We'll have to do that for another interview and just talk music.
Yes.
And that would be amazing. I would love that, May. But thank you so much for dropping into my show. I love talking with you. I hope you all have loved listening to May Valentine's story, and stay tuned for more here on Face Turn with Candace Cordelia, where I bring you the most engaging and exciting interviews you have yet to see on the channel. Until next time, we'll see you later. Take care.
Thank you, guys.